സുഹൃത്തുക്കളെ, ഓൾ ഇന്ത്യ ഡെമോക്രാറ്റിക് സ്റ്റുഡൻസ് ഓർഗനൈസേഷൻ നാഷണൽ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ പോളിസി 2020 ബന്ധപ്പെട്ട് നടത്തിവരുന്ന ടോക്ക് സീരീസിൻ്റെ രണ്ടാമത്തെ ടോക്കാണ് ഇന്ന് നടക്കുന്നത്. ഇന്നത്തെ വിഷയം എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ നാഷണൽ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ പോളിസി എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഇവിടുത്തെ ഈ രാജ്യത്തെ ശാസ്ത്രീയ മതേതര ജനാധിപത്യ വിദ്യാഭ്യാസത്തെ ബാധിക്കുന്നത് എന്നുള്ള വിഷയമാണ്. നമ്മൾക്കറിയാം, ഒരു ആധുനിക ജനാധിപത്യ രാജ്യത്ത് ഏറ്റവും പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട ഒരു ഘടകമാണ് ആ രാജ്യത്ത് നൽകുന്ന വിദ്യാഭ്യാസം. ആ വിദ്യാഭ്യാസമാകട്ടെ ശാസ്ത്രീയമായിരിക്കണം, മതേതരമായിരിക്കണം, ജനാധിപത്യ മൂല്യങ്ങൾ നൽകുന്ന വിദ്യാഭ്യാസമായിരിക്കണം. പക്ഷേ നമുക്കറിയാം, ഈ സർക്കാർ അധികാരത്തിലേറിയ കാലം തൊട്ടേ ഈ വാല്യൂസിന് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഈ ഇതിനെതിരെ കാര്യമായ പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങളാണ് നടത്തിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നത്. സെക്യുലർ എന്ന പദം പോലും നമ്മുടെ കോൺസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂഷനിൽ വേണ്ട എന്നാണ് അവർ പറയുന്നത്. സർക്കാരിൻ്റെ മുൻകൈയിൽ കൊണ്ടുവന്നിരിക്കുന്ന നാഷണൽ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ പോളിസി 2020 ഈ ഈ വാല്യൂസിനെ, ഒരു ജനാധിപത്യ രാജ്യത്തിന് അത്യാവശ്യമായ 3 വാല്യൂസിനെ എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഇതിനെ നിഷേധിക്കുന്നത് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അതിനെ ഭീഷണിയായി മാറിയത് എന്ന് നമുക്ക് പരിശോധിക്കേണ്ടതുണ്ട്. ഇതിനെപ്പറ്റി ഇന്നത്തെ നമ്മുടെ ടോക്ക് നടത്തുന്നത് ഓൾ ഇന്ത്യ സേവ് എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ കമ്മിറ്റിയുടെ തമിഴ്നാട്ടിലെ സ്റ്റേറ്റ് കൺവീനറായ പ്രൊഫസർ തിലകർ SH ആണ്. അപ്പോൾ സാറിനെ അധികം വൈകാതെ തന്നെ ഈ ടോക്കിലേക്ക് ഞാൻ ക്ഷണിക്കുകയാണ്. ഐ respectfully welcome Professor SH Tilagar to deliver his speak on national education policy and on the importance of a scientific, secular and democratic education. Sir, please.
Thank you, Akhil Murali. Dear friends, today I have been asked to speak on the topic secular, scientific and democratic education by the Kerala All India Democratic Students Organization. I am very, very happy to join in this occasion. I consider this as my privilege and honor to speak before you on this topic. As you know, this concept of secular, scientific, democratic education has evolved in history over a very difficult time in the period of 14th and 15th century of the human society. Long back, the human society witnessed actually a long period of dark age before the advent of science in 14th, 15th century. This age was called dark age not because of the thing that human intellect was less compared to the later scientific age. Actually, it produced great men like Ptolemy, Socrates, Aristotle, much longer compared to the scientific age. But even then, even though it has produced such great luminaries like Aristotle, why the society was considered to be a dark age? If we understand this historical background, I think then only we'll be able to appreciate what is the secular, scientific and democratic education. So let us move on to the history, and after discussing a few points, let us come back to the present status. It was the idea of Ptolemy, Socrates, Aristotle that Earth is the center of the solar system. These great men, not only in the field of astronomy, but in many other fields also, they had made their contributions, as we know. But all these ideas whatever came in their mind were simply based on their beliefs. What they believed, they preached. and their beliefs ultimately became the thinking process of the human society. Actually, this geocentric theory, as propounded by Aristotle, that Earth is the center of the solar system, had a deep impact, long impact in the human society in such a way that it is the Aristotle's belief, so it should be correct. This kind of unquestionable thing, what has come in the human mind, in human society, has ended up with a situation where man refused to raise any question against any belief, because such may great men have said these things, so it should be correct. This way human being started to think. So this kind of thinking, that is belief and based on that practice, was prevailing for several centuries. I would say more than 10 centuries in the human society. That age is called the Dark Age. And ultimately it was in 15th century, great men like Nicholas Copernicus, Giordano Bruno, Tycho Brahe, Johannes Kepler, Galileo Galilei, all these great men, they are all giants in their own fields, in their own contributions. They place the idea on one based on one thing, that we have to do anything experimentally and then only start believing things based on the experimental results. For instance, Nicholas Copernicus, in his studies, he found that the astronomy, what was there earlier, that the planetary motions and the supposedly the motion of the sun is such that all the planetary motions are going in epicircles. Epicircles means a small circle in a trajectory of circle. What they believed, that all the planets are moving around the Earth. The belief previous to Copernicus was that all the planets and sun are moving around the Earth. This belief was a contradictory one when they found that this kind of epicircles around the movement of a circle. This was creating a hurdle in the thinking process of man, in the sense, when man has set out into seas to move from one country to another for the purpose of trade, they looked at the sky, and in the sky all the planetary motions were in epicircles. Then they thought something is wrong. We have to definitely question this belief, what was there for more than 10 centuries, the belief of the Aristotle and such great men. So they started questioning the belief. Ultimately, in their studies, they found, particularly Copernicus found, that sun is the center of the solar system, but he was very much fearful to disclose it, because in those days, in 15th century, church was controlling everything, starting from education to all sorts of the social life. The church was having a deep impact, deep control. So Copernicus could not publish his results. It was ultimately his subordinate who has published this result, and it was Giordano Bruno, a priest by practice. He went through the Copernicus heliocentric theory and understood that sun is the center of the solar system. Then this man who was born in Italy, when he started propagating this Copernicus heliocentric theory, the church came heavily against him. Then he went away from Italy. He moved from country to country throughout Europe and propagated the heliocentric theory. And wherever he went, church was against him. Church was simply chasing him. Ultimately, a trap was set on Giordano Bruno to make him to come and take a tuition, private tuition to a school student. When he came to Italy back for that, he was arrested. Ultimately, he was, trial was conducted against him, and he was burnt alive for the only crime that he did was he propagated the heliocentric theory, where sun is the center of the solar system. So this idea, what Copernicus have found from his studies, went against the belief of the society, went against the church. Ultimately, church was punishing them. We know in such hard days, it was Copernicus, then Giordano Bruno. They were alone in their studies, in their findings, in their beliefs. They were alone. But today we know everybody understands heliocentric theory. Everybody knows that sun is the center of the solar system. But how it came, how all these changes came about, it did not come about so easily. Human society had to undergo a very hard time to establish such beliefs. And for that, we have to thank great men like Galileo, Descartes, Francis Bacon. These are all great giants who contributed to the methods of science. Let me say a few words what Galileo said about practice of science. Galileo said, I think that in the discussion of natural problems, we ought to begin not with scriptures, but with the experiments and demonstrations. So this way, Galileo stressed upon experimentation and demonstrations. He not only just stressed upon that, he himself did many experiments. The famous experiment on pendulum to find the period of oscillation was the experimental study based on which Galileo arrived at a theory. So it was experiment based on which a belief was given shape by Galileo. And Galileo made so many such other experiments. We know the famous experiment of dropping two heavy objects from Pisa Tower. I mean, one heavier and the other one lighter one, and to see which one reaches the surface of Earth faster. Galileo proved both the objects reaches at the same time. In earlier days, it was believed that the heavier object will reach the surface of Earth fast and the lighter object will reach the surface of Earth later. But this belief was broken for the first time in history by his experiment. So for the first time in human history, that is in 15th or 16th century, it was established that for anything to believe, we have to do experiment. We have to do observation based on experiment. This way, for the first time in human history, they have established. Not only that, in the same contemporary period, human society found the emergence of another giant, that is Francis Bacon. Bacon, as we know, is a giant person who was involved in all the aspects of the human life, in philosophy, in law, in literature, in science. In every field he contributed. Though by practice he was not a scientist, but he was the first person to establish the principles of scientific method. Now, I would say in his own words what Francis Bacon said about science, I would say, the corruption of philosophy by the mixing of it up with superstition and theology is of a much wider extent and is most injurious to it both as in whole and in parts. Means what he stresses here is, if we say something as a philosophy, that philosophy should not be mixed up with superstition and theology. This is the understanding of Francis Bacon. That means he says you separate superstitious beliefs and theological beliefs from the philosophical field. Then only you will be able to establish a correct philosophy. This is the understanding of Francis Bacon. In the same time, another giant emerged, that is René Descartes. What he said about science? He said about, in his famous book Discourse on Method, in that book he says, never to accept anything for true which I had not clearly known to be such. Let me again repeat, never to accept anything for true which I did not clearly know to be such. Means don't accept anything as truth if you are not clear about it. This is René Descartes. And Descartes went on to establish different principles of the guiding principles of the reasoning he established. To say about these principles, let me say the first principle is not to accept anything based on prejudice, but only based on confirmation from objective study. Another guiding principle of Descartes is divide a big question into smaller pieces and try to seek answer for everything. And another his guideline is that if you want to study a complex phenomenon, then divide that into simplest possible cases and analyze each and every case in a step-by-step manner, come to a conclusion, and then integrate everything into a whole truth. And the last guideline what he gave was to come to the general conclusion of study. To come to a general conclusion of a study, he said it has to be complete and care has to be exercised not to omit anything. This way, he established for the first time in human history the basic guideline of scientific method. This way only in 15th, 16th century, science emerged as a methodological phenomenon to analyze, to understand any natural phenomenon or social phenomenon in this world. And combining all these three giants guiding principles of Galileo, Descartes, and Francis Bacon, one giant scientist emerged, and that was Isaac Newton, as we know. And we know the contribution of Isaac Newton. And after that, so many scientists, a galaxy of scientists, the human society have produced, as we know. All these scientists have followed the fundamental principles that you have to believe anything based on experiment and based on evidence, whatever observations you are getting from experiments, then only you have to construct a belief based on that or a theory based on that. This is actually science and scientific method as I understand. Now, this scientific method now in present day is being deviated in a big way. Let me come to that point later. Now, coming to the question of secularism. Actually, this secularism or secular principle, what we call, emerged after the advent of science, after the science came into existence. Okay. Actually, this secularism, as to put it in the words of J.S. Mill, J.S. Mill says, secularism means non-recognition of any supernatural entity, means not recognizing anything above man, above nature, above natural laws, don't recognize anything. This is the understanding of secularism. And when it comes to the question of belief of this supernatural entity, if one starts believing on it, it is his or her individual or private affair. Let one individual shall not bring that kind of belief into a social affair. This is the understanding of secularism. On one side, not believing a supernatural entity. On the other side, if I believe also, I will not mix it with the social affair. This is the understanding and this is the practice of the secularism. As it came in the democratic revolutions of the countries in Britain, France, etc. In Great Britain, it was Industrial Revolution. In France, it was the French Revolution, which produced all such noble ideas. Not only that, it is through these revolutions only, as we know, the democratic principles also had come into existence. The concept of liberty, fraternity, and equality, such noble slogans came up in the French Revolution and also in the American War of Independence. This kind of concepts emerged. It had not emerged just like that. It was through hard struggles, and human beings paid a heavy price by sacrificing their lives. Many democratic ideas came into existence. And these democratic ideas it did not prevail in the field of ideas, it was practiced also, and particularly in the field of education. In the field of education, for the first time, after the advent of science and scientific method, for the first time, the education was opened to the entire society. In the previous situation, that is before the advent of science and scientific methodologies, before the 15th century, what we find, science was kept as an affair of the rich section of the society. It was not available to all. Education was not available to all. Fine. So in that background, that is after the advent of science, after the advent of the democratic revolutions only, the idea of bringing education to all came up, that we normally call as universalization of education. So this very idea of universalization of education came up because man started to think that thinking process, knowledge does not belong to a selected few. It belongs to the entire society, and the entire society have to come and struggle with the newer and newer ideas to achieve the right idea. A struggle has to take place inside the society, and for that the entire society has to be educated. This way the democratic revolutions brought newer changes in the field of education, and education for the first time in human history became not only available to all, but it became free also. For that matter, I can say even today in countries like France and Germany, education is free, totally free, up to higher education, up to the highest level of education, that is up to postgraduate and doctoral studies. Education is free. But how it came about? It came about through hard, difficult struggles, through democratic revolutions. It came about by the street level struggles organized by the students, organized by the youth for their freedom, for their education, for their right to have education. So here what I was trying to say is that in human history, we find that human societies have undergone very hard, difficult struggles to relieve the society from dark ages to come to a science age, starting from 15th century onwards. After that, we found enormous number of scientists started practicing science. They insisted on evidence-based science, not to believe anything beyond the evidence. This kind of practice came about, and this secular concepts came about. Church was totally removed from the tentacles of the church on the educational institutions, was totally removed. The classical example is Cambridge University and Oxford University, where the emperors and the church were having very deep control, close control on the Cambridge and Oxford University, for the first time has been freed after the advent of science and scientific method and democratic revolutions. So it is a long history, very difficult struggle that helped to establish a scientific thinking process in human society, that helped to establish secular principles and remove religion from the field of social affairs and particularly education. And ultimately, the democratic revolutions have helped to establish the concept of universalization of education, that is education for all in the truest sense of the term. Now, when Britishers came to India, of course, they came up with all these ideas. It is through them, our forefathers, great men like Rajaram Mohan Rai, great men like Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, for the first time came to know about the concepts of scientific, secular, and democratic education. But it was not, the credit will not totally go to the Britishers, because Britishers did not do that kind of justice to us. It will be strange to know a fact that Britishers who came from such a rich background of scientific, secular, democratic education in their own society, they came to India, they enslaved India, and they insisted on Oriental education. They insisted on providing education through Sanskrit language. It is strange to know this fact. Britishers insisted to teach Sanskrit language or Oriental education. But great man Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, a great luminary of 19th century India had produced, he understood that it is modern science, it is the idea of secularism, it is the concept of democratic principles that has to guide the society. He understood this not just in words, he understood it very, very deeply. And in that process, he practiced it. In his entire life, he practiced it. He went to village after village. He raised money to open schools for girl children because Britishers were not interested in providing education for even Indian children. But Vidyasagar, it was Vidyasagar who understood the importance of education and understood the importance of educating the girl children particularly, because without liberating girls, the society will not be truly liberated. Vidyasagar realized it and he took efforts for that. Not only Vidyasagar, later on so many other luminaries also, like Phule and Sarachandra, Subramania Bharati, Vivekananda, all these luminaries insisted on educating people. Vivekananda said the purpose of education is not to create, people with the whole lot of knowledge of a library. If a person is becoming like an encyclopedia, then libraries are the encyclopedias. Like libraries have all knowledge. So knowledge inside the mind without any use is of no use. So Vivekananda said the knowledge have to be converted, translated into a man-making, character building process. Vivekananda insisted on that. Not only that, it was Subramania Bharatiyar, a great man who emerged from Tamil Nadu. He insisted the importance of moral education. Without morals, without ethics, there is no purpose of getting educated or calling oneself to be educated. So he insisted very much on morals and ethics. Not only that, great men like Lala Lajpati Rai, who dreamt of a national education, a country with a national education policy, which is truly creating a situation for universalization of education or providing education for all. Lala Lajpati Rai dreamt for that. In his writings, he insisted on that. But all these ideas of scientific, secular, democratic education, which came from Europe to India, and through Vidyasagar, through Phule, through Vivekananda, through Bharatiyar, when it got manifested in the Indian freedom movement and Renaissance movement, whether all these things got translated into practice after India got freedom, yes, one small spark was there in Kothari Commission's suggestions for providing education for all. Kothari Commission, instituted by the central government of India in 1962, insisted on education for all. It insisted on providing 10% allocation of budget, funds in budget, central budget. But all the, very basic suggestions of the Kothari Commission itself was not practiced, was not brought into practice by the government of India in those days itself, in 1960s itself. And particularly it was in 1986, for the first time, the education policy of India took a drastic turn, a turn which nobody have thought of, that education is a field for investment. For the first time, the government of India in 1986, the then government, Congress government, have introduced a national education policy in 1986, which insisted that education is a field of investment. And from that situation onwards, the government have drastically reduced its fund allocation to education. It was in the first budget, it was 7.2% that was allocated for education. But in 1980s, after 1986 education policy, it became a meager 2% fund allocation for education. This 1986 education policy insisted on many things. It insisted on vocationalization of education, giving, teaching some trades to students. It does not insist on science and scientific education. So by vocationalizing the education, the importance of teaching the science subjects, teaching the scientific process was negated. Not only that, particularly after this particular government, the present day government has come to power. This NEP 2020, what we call National Education Policy 2020, is following the same footsteps of the 1986 policy. Already from 1986 onwards, in the last 2 to 3 decades, education has been rampantly commercialized and privatized. We have seen mushrooming of private institution in every corner of the cities and towns and villages, everywhere. And parallelly, the fund allocations for the government schools and colleges have been drastically cut. The regular teaching vacancy posts have not been filled for the last 2 to 3 decades. We heard of in 1986 policy, education policy started telling about appointing more number of teachers in schools. They shed tears that there are schools, hundreds of schools which has only one teacher. They said we have to appoint more number of teachers, but they did not do anything in practice. Simply it was empty words in the document. Now NEP 2020 says it follows the footsteps of 1986 policy, and the NEP 2020 is trying to fulfill the tasks what 1986 have outlined, have not yet completed. It is trying to complete it. Already education has been to a large extent commercialized and privatized, but one thing is left out, that is the government schools and government colleges, the public institutions that we call as a public funded education system, that they are targeting now. Already we are seeing 60 to 70% of the teaching posts are filled up with the contract teachers. As we find contract laborers in industry, they are calling us contract teachers. This name itself is a very sad thing. How a teacher can be a contract teacher. Actually, the noble job in the society, the noblest job in the society is supposed to be the teacher's job. Because a teacher creates a thinking mind, a thinking person who can be made to be capable of thinking in a scientific way, in a secular way, who can be made to practice noble ideas in one's own life. For that, a teacher has to become an example. For that, a teacher has to become an example by himself. Such a noble profession has been reduced to contract teachers. Now NEP 2020 has not addressed all these basic problems of the education system in India. The privatization, commercialization, they have not addressed. Sky high fees, that is removing the major number of students from education, they have not talked about. And further, if we see what is happening, they are going even a step further, that is communalizing the education. In this NEP 2020 document, there is not even a single mention of the word secularism. They have conveniently avoided using the word secularism, which means they don't want to practice secularism. Rather, in the NEP 2020 document, at many places they are insisting on bringing Sanskrit or imposing Sanskrit in all the states. For Sanskrit, they have allocated more than 300 crores of rupees. But for other vernacular languages, no allotment of money has been done. It is being told that only 20,000 people are speaking Sanskrit. But on the other hand, millions of people are speaking other vernacular languages. All those languages have not been given importance. Then what is the purpose behind it? Through Sanskrit, as Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar have fought against the teaching of Sanskrit based education. He warned that Sanskrit only has the old ideas, the ideas which have been discarded long back, that is the caste and communal system. The society has already discarded it. So he said to the Britishers, don't teach us Sanskrit and Vedas, which talks about Varnashram system, that is the caste system. He said, we don't want Sanskrit and the education based on that. He said, we want to be taught about modern science, and for that he insisted English to be taught. Not because of the reason that English is a very advanced language only, not because of that. English, through English as a vehicle of thinking process, English can bring the modern science, the modern literature to every different state where different languages are being spoken, and thereby it will strengthen those respective languages also. In Tamil Nadu, Subramania Bharatiyar also said, in Tamil I would say, in his own words, Sendridivir yettu thikkum kalai chelvangal yavum kunarningu serpir, which means Subramania Bharatiyar said, you go all around the world, learn all the modern languages, get to know all the modern thinking process, and thereby enrich your own language. So thereby Bharatiyar himself have advocated learning the language which has the modern thinking process. So such great men like Vidyasagar, like Bharatiyar, insisted on teaching the advanced language, that is English. But what we find, this present government through NEP 2020 is insisting on teaching Sanskrit and Hindi. Particularly, we are not against these languages, Hindi and Sanskrit, but what is the motive behind it? We have to be, aware of that. So what we find through, now they are targeting the public funded education system. They are telling the fund allocation, why it should always go to the government institutions. Why not private institutions? They are telling, we will also provide funds to the private educational institutions. Here the basic question is, all the taxpayers' money or all the people's money which is accumulated through several forms of taxes, if this money is being allocated, already the allocation is only 1 to 2% or much less than 2%. Even that money they want to allocate for the private institutions. We know, in our own experience, we know institutions like public institutions like BSNL, public institutions like Air India. What is their position today? All these public institutions were set up with the people's money. Now we find BSNL is nowhere. Now we find Air India is nowhere. Similar to the same situation, we are going to see the well-established central universities, the well-established state universities are being targeted now. We know what has happened to JNU. We know what is happening in IITs. IITs are offered soft loans. Now, with the soft loans, they are asked to pay the salary to their teachers. IITs are considered to be the dream institutions in this country. But the staffs of the professors of the IITs are going to be paid with loans taken from the bank. Then who will repay the money? It seems the IIT has to raise money and repay the money back to the bank. Can it really happen? Can an educational institution raise loan and run for a long time? That means they are making it to bleed. They are making the public education institutions to bleed and take a natural death. If you do not take a natural death, then go for a commercialization mode. Just a couple of weeks back, IIT Madras have started an online course offering BSc degree in data science. Actually, IIT is an engineering institution. It's an institution of excellence in engineering. We all know that, but IIT is now offering a BSc course in data science. What for? It is an online course. it will fetch money for IIT, so that that money will be available for to pay salaries to their own teachers. Friends, this is the situation of IITs today, the centers of excellence. So it is a systematic attack on the public funded education system on one hand, and through bringing Sanskrit and the important scriptures what Sanskrit have produced, the discarded ideas what Sanskrit is having, they are going to bring it back. That is we call as communalization of education. And the last and most dangerous thing is the centralization of education. See, India is a federal structure, and education in before the emergency period, education was in the state list. Every state has been empowered. It had been empowered to decide the course of action in the field of education. The school education department can fix their own curriculum and syllabus. Higher education department can fix the curriculum and syllabus for higher education institutions. It was the situation like that. But for the first time in 1976, during the days of emergency, education have been taken into the concurrent list. Means both central government and state government will control education. But it was just a name. The name was just a concurrent list. But even then, in those days itself, they started controlling. The central government started controlling the education of the states. NCERT was framing the curriculum and syllabus and guiding the states to follow it, and the SCERTs had to follow it on one side. Now, National Curriculum Framework, what came in 2005, it insisted on actually making mathematics and science as optional subjects. Friends, can we even think without mathematics and science whether school education can remain as school education? But National Curriculum Framework of School Education in 2005, brought by the then government, insisted on making science and maths as optional. Now NEP 2020, if you go through the document, you will find it is talking about vocational education. Means teaching some trades to the students of the particular localities. If a student comes from a coastal district, they will teach a trade how to do fishing. If a student comes from an area where some industries are there, then they will teach him or her some fitting or carpentry or electrician, those kind of trades, starting from 6th standard. We all know that education till 10th standard has to be a common education. But from 6th standard itself, they want to impose vocational education. So vocationalization of education is another trend, important trend that is taking a big way through this NEP 2020. So what we find, privatization, commercialization, and communalization of education on one hand. On the other hand, vocationalization and centralization of education is taking place. Central government is taking the total control of education into its hand. This Rashtriya Shiksha Ayog, what has been planned to be implemented, takes, it is going to take the entire control of the education into the hands of the central government. So I feel what is knocking the doors of education, future education, is a very, very dangerous trend. This trend is such that this wants to reverse the onward march of the human society. It wants to reverse it. We found in the days of Britishers, millions and millions of people are uneducated. We are going to see a situation where students are going to be thrown away from the arena of education in the name of vocational education, in the name of having more and more entrance exams after school education. Millions of students are going to be filtered. So this way, a very, very dangerous attack is coming and knocking our door. Actually, it is a blueprint to implement more and more privatization, more and more commercialization, and all-out communalization of education, all-out vocationalization of education. They have given a name called skilling. They want every person to have some skill. They consider man to have some skills is the only purpose of life. This is a very, very dangerous thing. The great man Einstein, great scientist Einstein said, the purpose of education is to not to create robots. The purpose of education is to create a harmonious personality who has knowledge in every field and becomes a harmonious personality. So I feel, friends, we have a large challenging task remaining before us, that we have to understand the history very deeply and to know, to move from this place forward in a radical way. After understanding the history, accordingly we have to act, understanding the present day dangers. Though the situation seems to be dark, I feel if we understand the situation well and act in a very meticulous and systematic way, I think the dream of the great men like Vidyasagar, Vivekananda, Tagore, Subramanya Bharatiyar of having universalized education, having education with democratic, secular, and scientific values, I think will not be far-fetched from us. It is achievable. We can achieve it, provided if we understand the danger before us and act accordingly in a systematic way. So here I conclude, and I think we shall have some discussion here. Thank you, friends. Thank you for the opportunity provided to me. Now it is open for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for dealing with a few aspects that are coming and increasing attacks in our country. Now we have a few questions here.
Yeah.
I'll place them to you one by one. First of it is, how important is public funding for a scientific, secular, and democratic education?
Yes, actually, this is a very crucial question because uh, po- without fund, actually, science cannot flourish. I will say a very recent happening that we found in the last couple of years. Government of India has reduced the funding for CSIR labs. We all know the CSIR labs are supposed to be the central government's research laboratories in different fields. They are doing frontline research actually in different field of science, starting from pharmaceuticals to leather to fundamental sciences, okay, in different fields. Now from 1200 crore funding, they have reduced to meager 300 crore funding. Okay, so what happened after that? They have stopped all their fundamental researches, and they found this 300 crore is available only to pay the salary to the researchers, not to not to purchase equipments, okay, not to do the research on fundamental science. So this is on one hand. Another side, the same central government is allocating 1000+ crores for doing research on Panchakavya, that is on cow. From cow we are getting milk. Besides that, cow dung is there, cow urine is there, and so on and so forth. So these things from cow, they are encouraging research on cow, projecting that cow is the holy animal of the Indian society, and we have to do lots of research to understand the greatness of cow. But all these scientists were keeping their fingers crossed. How a cow's urine will be different from other animals' urine? What has happened to these kind of fund allocations of the central government? Okay, so fundamental science has been sidelined by reducing the funds for the CSIR labs, by reducing the funding for IITs, okay, IITs and IISc, which are doing the frontline research in our country. Okay, on the other hand, these kind of irrational beliefs that cow urine is sacred, and we recently found that many people drank cow urine during corona time. To fight corona, drink cow urine. It is a good that all people have not followed it. Only some ministers and MLAs and some few people have followed it, I think. So importance of science is this government knows, but it is not providing sufficient funds. By reducing it, the science and research is now getting affected. This much I want to say.
Okay, sir. Now we have a next questions. Most of these questions are not fully related to the topic, but those are
Okay.
aspects which have created confusion among people.
Okay.
So
Okay.
first of this is, what are the advantages and disadvantages of studying in mother tongue?
Okay. Actually, advantage is if one studies in mother tongue, actually the very thinking process. A child starts understanding its environment right from the day one of its birth. It tries to understand its environment. But gradually, the brain is able to understand the words and correlate with the situation or environment around it. So the very first understanding of the environment, of nature, of the relationships are happening only in mother tongue. And the entire human thinking process is set based on the mother tongue. So if a child happens to get education through mother tongue as medium of instruction, then that is the best way of getting education. That is why we find countries like Japan, countries like Russia, China, Germany, who are who have advanced a lot, means who have reached peaks peak in every field of science in their country. They are learning everything through the mother tongue, including France, Spain also. At the same time, we have to again appreciate that they have developed their mother tongue by rigorous hard work. Every field they have done hard work, and they have developed in every field of science, arts, literature, they have developed the mother tongue. But in our country, for many historical reasons, the mother tongue, all the mother tongues for that matter, have not developed to the extent what we find in countries like France, Germany, Japan, and so on. So we need to develop our mother tongue also. But again, it is not one person or a few persons' job. It is the job of the society. So it is a long way to go to really enrich our own mother tongues. To enrich our mother tongue, we need to learn such advanced, the languages which has really advanced in other fields. As I cited an example, we have to learn language like English, German, French. All these languages are required to be learned. Very recently, the government of India has proposed to abolish Mandarin. Mandarin is a language spoken in China. Now, China, whether we like it or not, is a country very much advanced in science and technology. So if we do not learn Mandarin, then we are going to miss something. So what I am trying to come is that to develop our own mother tongue, we need to learn languages which have really advanced in all fields. So mother tongue is definitely primarily important, but we have to also remember that we should develop the mother tongue also.
Thank you, sir. Now we move to another question, which has also created a lot of confusions uh,
Yes.
because NEP keeps repeating it all the time. What is the difference between multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary courses?
What is there in NEP 2020 document?
No,
Is it a general question or a question
it is
related to NEP?
it is a general question, but I think it is probably asked because of the discussions about NEP, because NEP keeps talking about multidisciplinary courses as part of higher education.
Yes, fine. I would say some points. I will throw some ideas with related to that. Actually speaking, in a few decades back, in Indian education system, what we found was, say for example, BSc Physics. So physics will be taught definitely as the major subject, but parallelly ancillary subjects will be there. That will be mathematics sometimes, mostly mathematics will be ancillary subject, and another ancillary subject may be chemistry, or it may be something else like arts subject also will be there. A few decades back, I was told logic was the major subject in BSc Physics. ANSL means physics, mathematics, and logic. Okay. So if you try to analyze these subjects, they are multidisciplinary subjects. They are all multidisciplinary subjects. And there is no direct link between particularly physics and logic. Means logic is a very, very broad subject for that sense. Mathematics and physics are very, very related. That is, they are interdisciplinary subjects. They depend on each other. Mathematics and physics, they are interdependent with respect to each other. But multidisciplinary means some things are not straight away related, but it was there. So in a few decades back itself, we found there were multidisciplinary subjects in that sense with the importance primary subject. Physics means importance will be given to BSc physics, but of course other disciplinary subjects or discipline subjects also will be there. Today in NEP, what they are trying to bring, they are trying to bring like a hotel menu like curriculum. The interdisciplinary means mathematics and physics are dependent on each other. That is interdisciplinary. It also will be there, and science subject also will be there. That is multidisciplinary. But the point here is that the main focus should not be lost. A student studying physics should be thorough in physics. A student studying in English literature should be thorough in English literature. That focus should not be lost. But NEP, apparently it is very dangerous. They are telling every sort of subject can be taken. It is like a hotel menu. A student can go and choose any type of subjects. So this is what I wanted to say. The focus should not be lost. But NEP, it appears they are going to provide only arts as the main degree, and it appears by having mixture of many subjects, I fear focus will be lost in that.
Okay, sir. There was one more question.
What is the question? Again, you repeat the question.
How vocationalization of education is dangerous.
Okay. No, actually, you see, education should be common till class 10. Till 10th standard, education should be common. There shall not be any specialization before a student completes the 10th standard. But the present policy, NEP 2020, is talking about vocational education from class 6 onwards, bringing special subject from class 6. And the danger here is they are bringing one vocational subject, one trade, and they are going to remove another subject like mathematics or science or even both. If two vocational subjects are introduced and they are going to remove science and maths, is it agreeable? If a student doesn't learn mathematics and science at the age of at the class of 6th standard and 7th standard, then what basic knowledge he will get? He will finally remain as a normal fitter or an electrician or any other trade, whatever he has learned. He will become that kind of a person who will do that trade for his entire life. But the basic knowledge of mathematics and science is denied forever. So bringing vocational education at this low class, class 6, class 7, is dangerous in the sense basic knowledge is denied, analytical mind, thinking mind will not be there, and the student will not be able to understand the complex problems of life in society and his own personal life. So vocational education is dangerous in that way.
Okay, sir. Sir, if it would be very helpful if you could repeat some of your important points from earlier about multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary, because
yes.
Problems.
Yes, I will repeat. See, interdisciplinary education means mathematics and physics they are dependent on each other. Mathematics and physics are dependent subjects, so they are interdisciplinary. Multidisciplinary means mathematics and say English literature or physics and philosophy. They are not directly related to each other, though there is a relationship, but they are not directly related to each other. For example, physics and history, they are not directly related to each other. They are multidisciplinary subjects. Now, for a student, NEP, according to NEP 2020, a student can learn some amount of physics, some amount of history, some amount of philosophy, some amount of zoology. Fine. It is apparently for hearing, it is good. As we hear, oh, a student will learn so many subjects. It sounds good. But he will become a man of all trades, but a specialist of nothing. He will not get a focused knowledge, specialized knowledge in any particular thing. Equally, it is dangerous. A man always gets a specialized knowledge only in one field. That is also dangerous. Okay, a man has to know many things. That is true, but he has to be specialist at least in one field. Even though he knows many things, at least he should be a specialist in one field. Taking physics here, if a student does not know much about physics, then what is the purpose of that degree? So multidisciplinary, what NEP is talking about, has to be treaded carefully, has to be taken with a pinch of salt. It is not the multidisciplinary course what we really think of. We really think of a multidisciplinary course means focus on the main subject with some ancillary subjects. But NEP 2020 is talking about multidisciplinary course. There they mean all courses, but no real special knowledge in a particular subject. So that is dangerous. That is what I was trying to say.
Okay, sir. Thank you. That is
Yeah.
all the questions that have come. It was
Yes.
a very enlightening talk. You have covered on secular, scientific, and democratic education. You also answered questions that were not directly related, but has created a lot of confusions among people who has gone through NEP. It
Yes.
was great having you here, and we will meet in the further movements against all these issues that are an attack on education field. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Akhil Murali, and thank you for the opportunity to the All India Democratic Students Organization, Kerala. It is a wonderful opportunity for me to join with you in this occasion. Thank you, everybody. Okay.